I remind myself that I have to grab the microphone in the right direction so that the 2025 Chairs Forum should be seen. All right, thank you for the long and eloquent speech covering a lot of grounds. But since this is the afternoon session, everybody is content, happy, and sleepy with nice lunch. We have to be a little bit more provocative than we were in the morning session. So why do you see the prospect for Trump-Kim meeting over the APEC Summit meeting? Any speculations you would like to share? This is totally deviated from the main theme of your speech, but this is for the audience.
Okay. Well, we all know that President Trump is planning to come for the APEC Summit, and that he very much has continued to advertise his interest and willingness to meet with Kim Jong-un. And if we go back to 2019, the last meeting that the two had, the idea for that meeting really didn't materialize publicly until almost the end of, I believe it was a G7 summit in Japan, at which time President Trump tweeted his interest, and next thing you knew, there was an advance team of American officials at Panmunjom. And so and of course now it's become a subject of wide speculation. I don't think that we should rule it out. I don't know if it is likely to happen, but I think that really what's most notable also is on the other side. Kim Jong-un, his sister first made a statement that the relationship was bad and that there is absolutely no way, and I'm paraphrasing, on God's green earth that denuclearization would be a subject of discussion between the US and North Korea. But the relationship between President Trump and Kim Jong-un himself personally was, quote unquote, not bad. And subsequently, I think that we've seen statements directly from Kim Jong-un actually suggesting that there is an openness to re-engaging. And so we have to ask ourselves, well, what at this point would Kim Jong-un actually get out of it? I don't think that he necessarily needs it the way that he needed it in 2018 or 2019, because the geopolitical environment has shifted decisively in his favor. But that doesn't mean that if President Trump wants to offer, he might not be willing to pick up a courtesy gift bag if he is asked to come and pick one up.
If it does not take place this time between the two leaders, when is it likely to happen, and in what terms? Is it subject to the precondition that United States will recognize North Korea as a de facto nuclear state in some ways? Or can it happen without that?
So one point that I failed to mention in my presentation that I think is worth underscoring and is very relevant is that, under the Trump administration, there are really two lines of communication with the US government. One is the personal line, and the other is what happens in the bureaucracy. And that means that they can also be wildly separate from each other. And I think that this is one case where, in fact, there might be a desire to see them separated from each other. I think that it's entirely possible to imagine that President Trump himself might indulge in his desire to engage with Kim Jong-un in ways that actually don't necessarily have that much direct impact on the US policy toward North Korea. Another way of putting it is that I really don't expect the US government to give up its policy of insisting on North Korea's denuclearization. Even if President Trump were to say that he doesn't care about it, I'm not sure. Honestly, I think that there is sufficient resistance on the part of the American public, on the part of even Republicans in Congress, that he wouldn't go that far.
You wouldn't go that far. Another provocative and speculative question is related to your topic. We are preparing for the Gyeongju APEC Summit meeting, and the speculation is that when leaders of South Korea and the United States will have the bilateral summit meeting in the sidelines of the APEC Summit meeting, then that will be the time that both countries finally reach the agreement on tariff issues. Is it too optimistic? Because based upon what I heard from government officials' statements, like Minister Kim Jong-un, Minister Moti, his messages have been quite mixed. He said that United States government has accepted most of our requests and explanations, but at the same time, he was not really certain about when the agreement can be reached, because he said that the timing of the agreement is less important than realization of the national interest of South Korea. And although he expressed a cautiously optimistic outlook for the agreement, he also said that if necessary, he's willing to fly back to the United States.
Yeah.
So what's going on here?
Well,
Of course, you're not Mr. Kim, but
obviously I don't know because I'm outside of that process. But I think that what we all recognize is that the one thing that we can count on is that President Trump wants to retain the image and fact of his unpredictability. It's what causes people to pay attention. And so I think that he'll keep this going. It's just, it's an issue-based episode of The Apprentice, and he just doesn't want anybody to know until he tells them what the final decision is going to be. And I think that the Trump administration actually has left open, perhaps inadvertently, the possibility of a delay, or at least taking a lot of the pressure off of APEC as an action-forcing event because of his decision to stay such a short time in South Korea. And so that, I think, does provide the possibility that there's a pretext for allowing the negotiation to extend if it is necessary. The most important thing about this particular negotiation at this stage, I think, is that it really does have to be in the mutual interest of both countries. Otherwise, it means that it's going to have to be renegotiated. Now, having said that, I'm actually expecting that the experience of working with President Trump for most counterparts is going to be an experience of perpetual negotiations on various issues over the course of the next 3 years plus. And so there will be no end. And so even, I would say that the conclusion of a framework negotiation is just an entry ticket to the next negotiation. And maybe even more so because, as Trade Minister Ya has said at one point, the devil is in the details. And we don't yet see the Trump administration really enabling or actually pursuing mechanisms that enable very many details to be finally negotiated. Plus, the environment is going to change. There's going to be new issues. What if the IEEPA authority that President Trump has pursued tariffs under is overturned? It won't stop tariffs from continuing, but it will give some counterparts pause. And so I think the really tough thing about this whole process is it's very hard to know when to conclude a negotiation and whether it's better to go early or late.
well, if you consider the strategic benefits and positions of South Korean government, then would you say that delaying is a good strategy for South Korea? You mentioned two variables. One is the ongoing U.S.-China confrontation on the tariff issues, whether South Korea will be better off to wait until it sees the outcomes of the U.S.-China trade dispute and move. And second thing is, as you said, the Supreme Court decision is likely to come out on the EPA sometime early next year. Then would you say the South Korean government would be better off to, delay the closure of these festering negotiations with the United States on tariff and see whether it's a strategic position or the environment you mentioned of the negotiation will change? Or is it going to be an inferior strategy for South Korea?
I kind of see those as cross currents. They're going in different directions from each other. There's a temptation, I think, to delay and wait until the Supreme Court makes its decision on IEEPA, but I'm not sure that that is really going to change the material circumstances around the negotiation. As regards the timing of a U.S.-Korea deal versus a U.S.-China deal, my own view is that it would be better for the U.S. and South Korea to come to a conclusion in advance of a U.S.-China agreement. But I also think we have to look at what do we mean by a U.S.-China agreement. And what I would say is that with regard to both the U.S.-Korea process and the U.S.-China process at this stage, in both cases, we're basically riding a roller coaster. And there's going to be ups and downs. And actually, yes, we have a November 10th deadline for a U.S.-China agreement before tariffs might kick back in. We're hearing optimistic noises at this moment, but that could change. We could be back to tariff threats. And even after November 10th, in the event of an agreement, I think the latest is that President Trump publicly disclosed that he thought he would visit China early next year. That could also change. But I think that regardless of what happens with the U.S., I think the U.S.-China agreement or negotiation, tariff negotiation is just very different from U.S.-South Korea. And also, South Korea benefits, I think, in that negotiation process from going first before there's any kind of U.S.-China settlement. Because if there is some kind of U.S.-China settlement, there may be terms that make aspects of a U.S.-South Korea agreement less attractive after that agreement than before.
Okay. The second question regards the term you use, engagement without confrontation, right? I'd like to hear more about this concept you introduced. Would you elaborate a little bit more on this advice? Because you detailed the concept or strategy saying that Korea should have bought the membership in the golf course in Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Is it still a valid piece of the advice? Smile, flattery, don't avoid Trump, keep selling Trump, accept unpredictability of him, strive for agility in response. These are fascinating pieces of advice, but how do South Korean government and corporations put these pieces of advice in actual practice in dealing with Trump administration?
Well, I think first
Any
of all,
examples?
look for opportunities to engage. But I think that we all know that if you confront the president with unpleasant facts directly in public, that things might not go so well. So better to take care of those issues behind the scenes. But if you have a chance to engage in whatever form, I think that you should pursue it. Another way of putting it, and of course, in a way I'm going to be contradicting myself here, initially there was a debate about whether President Lee should go to the G7 in Canada. It was decided that he would go, and one of the reasons why he went was in order to meet President Trump. And I think that was the right decision, even though that the meeting didn't happen. Then he decided not to go to NATO. Okay, that's understandable. But it might have been a kind of missed opportunity. We don't know. And so I would just say that, if coming to an understanding with President Trump on particular issues is really important, then you have to make it a priority. And it means that you don't want to miss an opportunity. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, just the president, although I would argue that the significance of the August 25th meeting was that it very clearly established that President Trump was recognizing Lee Jae Myung as his counterpart in a way that he had not done with any other Korean since January 20th. And so that means that that is the official channel. If you have informal ways of communicating with President Trump, then I think that everybody else is using them as much as possible. So why refrain? You need to look for opportunities to engage and shape, maybe especially behind the scenes.
Do you think that the Lee Jae Myung government of South Korea is responding to Trump administration okay? Does it have good strategies and good responses so far based upon your observation as a Korea watcher based in Washington, D.C.? Because Foreign Minister Cho Hyun made this remark in response to the Georgia Hyundai Motor Factory raid that United States does not appear to be the same United States we are accustomed to. So there might be some element of surprise and the confusion inside the Lee Jae Myung government of South Korea, not really knowing today's United States under the Trump administration.
The first order of business, I think, was to recover from the political paralysis that had basically frozen the relationship and kept South Korea from making any progress with the Trump administration for 6 months.
Since the declaration of the martial law in December.
Yes, I mean, essentially, the expectation, I think, was we saw a phone call between President-elect Trump and President Yoon, and that was supposed to signify the launch of a new relationship that was basically aborted by the declaration of martial law and subsequent events. And it basically meant a replay of 2016, 2017. Very unfortunate. So, okay, it delayed the starting gun for South Korea was June 3rd. And it's been a very steep learning curve. I think that it does take a while. I think everybody in Washington, frankly, has been trying to get their bearings with the new Trump administration, much less internationally. It's not necessarily the United States that I thought I knew in some ways. I mean, I think everybody is responding to this new approach to power and decision making. And we're watching domestically a lot of challenges. The Trump administration is moving forward, and so everybody's trying to find a way to get their bearings in that context. So, they made an agreement. They're trying to figure out how to move it forward. I think August 25th was important, but also the visit in a couple of weeks will be very important.
That's why people say that you always have new things to learn. The third question is about the concept of modernization of the bilateral alliance.
Yeah.
Some people say that, like Mr. Kim, it's good to have combining the issues to enrich the bilateral partnership from many different angles. Some people say that it is premature to bring in security issues when economic issues are still unsettled. What's your point on this concept of modernization of the military alliance between the two countries?
Well, right now I see those issues as being dealt with in separate tracks. They're both progress in various forms is being made. I think that the concept of alliance modernization, my preferred phrase before they came up with alliance modernization was going to be reconfiguring the alliance. Because I do think that enough has changed in the regional security environment that it would have been important, regardless of what else was happening, to ensure that our alliance framework and approaches were coordinated and fit for purpose. And I think that that's what the alliance modernization dialogue is really about. We're still waiting to try to understand exactly how the Trump administration is going to be thinking about China as a component of its Indo-Pacific defense strategy. And that has implications for how the US and South Korea interact with each other. Now, to be honest, I think that the alliance has already been dealing with that issue now for 7 or 8 years. We've already been coordinating in various forms policies toward China. And China has been the elephant in the room on security for a while. So in some ways, we are continuing to do what we have done. But I also believe that there's a difference between having that conversation about the relative significance of China versus North Korea in the context of a hypothetical discussion, which is, I think, that what we had before the Trump administration, and the circumstances where one anticipates the possibility of a more direct and single-minded focus on China, which is what actually has been signaled by some of the personnel appointments in the Trump administration. And so we have to see, how that plays out. But what I see is that there also has been advancement in the way in which South Korea is talking about its regional role. And also there's advancement in terms of what South Korea is willing to talk about. And I think that that is very notable and significant. It doesn't mean that South Korea is, the dialogue between the US and South Korea on regional threats is not, it's behind where the US-Japan dialogue is and has been. But I think that it's moving forward. And ultimately, I think that the more one digs into regional security issues and the relationship between cross-straits and regional security writ large, the harder it is to think that it's possible to keep potential threats separate in the event of a contingency. And so that means that we're all in on the same task of trying to prevent a conflict.
By all objective criteria used by the speakers, including yourself, in this conference today, South Korea is definitely very important, increasingly important partner of the United States, right? But the fear still lingers about Trump administration possibly use the security issues either as a leverage or retaliation if South Korea plays hardball in tariff negotiations with the United States. Because like your citation of what is said, the one-stop shopping is a beautiful process, and this deficit is a major threat to our economy and indeed our national security of the United States. So it appears that President Trump is willing to combine the two issues, not necessarily for common benefits, but as a leverage upon South Korea, even an instrument of retaliation. What do you think?
So the way that I look at this is that it's about adjusting from the values-based framework that we have enjoyed and that has brought us together, actually not just Biden administration, but many administrations preceding that, to a transactional approach. And I think that in my view, there's clear costs related to transactionalism. There's not as many benefits, but if that is the framework through which the president is going to look at the relationship, then in some ways you really don't have a choice if your counterpart is going to approach it that way. And so instead you have to try to find the strategy that is going to work in that environment. And so that's what I tried to lay out, was in an environment where transactionalism is the definition for managing the relationship, how do you protect your interests and how do you maximize your interests in that environment? Well, one thing that you can't have the luxury of doing is simply relying on shared values, even if it might be the superior foundation upon which to build the relationship.
Okay. I caution you, Minister Kim is still present here, because my next question is about your thoughts on trade ministers' speeches preceding this one. I was surprised, honestly speaking, that they were far more critical than I am of the initial outcome forged between the two governments, including 350 billion US dollars as an investment and whatnot. If I were working for South Korean government, which I do not, I would defend the decision saying that South Korea did not have any option, no option at all, right? So you had to stop the bleeding, uncertainties by forging any initial agreement. South Korea did not have any effective leverage at that time.
I do believe that South Korea was basically backed into a corner, but at the same time, I entirely appreciate, especially Minister Kim's strong defense of Chorus, since he helped to author that. I can totally understand. Honestly, the thing that's really interesting about that is that even though the new tariff framework seems to eviscerate Chorus, it still provides some bureaucratic channels for communication. And therefore, I think there's a desire on the part of the South Korean side to at least keep it active because of the importance of communication. But I mean, first of all, the framework is still pretty broad. There are points that I pointed out, especially related to the U.S.-Japan agreement, that I'm still wondering whether Japan can live up to. And therefore, I don't think it would necessarily be a great model for Korea. That's the reason why I think that actually the framing for the objectives is right, and that is that it needs to be mutually beneficial. And so I think that the right approach is to wait and work until you get a mutually beneficial agreement, not try to make an agreement based on an artificial deadline. And by the way, it works both ways. If living with the Trump administration means that your life is going to be subject to perpetual negotiations, then it also means that you can use that same tactic, right, to take up and challenge agreed upon results if the circumstances change in your favor.
For 3 more years at least, right?
While we're under the framework of a transactional approach.
Transactional approach, right. You mentioned Chorus FTA. Is it dead or alive? Is there any hope for free trade agreement between South Korea and the United States to be restored, resuscitated, brought back in any way? My argument is that United States may be learning its lessons from the destructive nature of protectionist trade policy. With the benefit of time, then United States may come to the previous senses in favor of free trade. Then United States and South Korea may be able to sign on something very similar to the original Chorus FTA. You mentioned a lot of headlines in the US media, newspapers, say, after the trade wars by Michael Froman, right? And reformulation of the global economic order. Then if Trump-style protectionist policy turns out to be very unpopular at home, and American corporations and households will be fed up with the backlash of the policy, then will there be chance for the United States, possibly during the remaining days of the Trump administration, or by its successors in the future to reevaluate the value of free trade agreement with South Korea?
Well,
Or is it dead forever?
well, it's not dead because it has not been abrogated. It's just being ignored
Ignored.
on the U.S. side, I would say.
Right. Will it be respected again?
Well, that depends on leadership. And so I think that it might not be as relevant now as it would have been under other circumstances, but it still has agreed upon institutional consultation mechanisms and principles and practices that can be revived if the two governments choose to do so.
Okay. All right. I asked this question to Professor Christensen, but I'm going to ask you the same question. What do we expect from the midterm election in the United States? Especially for its implications to U.S.-Korea bilateral partnerships, not just limited to economic aspects of it, but security and otherwise.
Well, I think that the election, the big question related to the election, most of the questions related to election, I think, are not going to have a direct impact on the U.S.-Korea relationship at this time. But it does have an impact on the Trump administration's freedom of action and relative power, or whether it's going to face constraints. And so what we normally see in midterms is we see the ruling party losing support. And that means that in the U.S. Congress, where it's very narrow in the House of Representatives, you could say under normal circumstances, it would be highly likely that the House of Representatives would be in the balance. But we're also seeing in the United States an unprecedented push to basically try to tilt the playing field in the Trump administration's favor through gerrymandering and redistricting at the state level in a number of states. And this, of course, is contested as a practice. It's contested politically. It'll probably be contested in the courts, but it's happening. And so it means that there's actually a slight counterweight structurally that the Trump administration is trying to employ to try to hold on to power. Whether or not that will work, we'll wait and see. The big factor, I would argue, is going to be how do Americans feel about the economy, as always. And so the predictions about inflation resulting from tariffs are relevant, but the Trump administration has a lot of other balls in the air as related to its own policies that may have some impact on that as well. And so, we'll just wait and see what the environment is next year.
You mentioned the South Korean corporations inroad into the U.S. market and building factories, and as a prelude to the deeper economic integration between the two countries. Do you see this as long-term pattern, kind of irreversible process of the integration between the two economies?
Not irreversible, I don't think, because we're testing it right now.
Testing stage?
I would say that current U.S. policies are potentially testing the durability of and attractiveness of inward FDI. I think that as a broad proposition, the American public, generally speaking, is open to and desires, especially technology and capital investments in parts of the United States that have been underinvested. But there's all sorts of other issues. I mean, shipbuilding is a perfect example, right? Our shipbuilding industry is fully protected by U.S. law. In order for shipbuilding, I would argue, to be a mutually profitable enterprise between the U.S. and South Korea, a number of those laws are going to have to change. Otherwise, you're just pouring good money after bad if you invest in a sector that is as currently protected as the U.S. shipbuilding industry. And so I think that the planned investments and the discussion is revolving around the premise that some of those laws can and should be changed. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense.
Right. You're the president of KEI based in Washington, D.C. as a think tank representing the partnership between the United States and South Korea. So as a leader of the organization for the remaining time, what kind of advice would you like to give South Korean public and the government in terms of promotion of mutual understanding and cooperation, both in the short term and in the long run? Based upon your observation of a lot of things have happened in recent period.
Yeah. Well, I think the best thing for me to do is really to focus on some additional results from our public opinion polling, because KEI sponsors this annual poll about American attitudes toward Korea. And it's important for people here to understand that broadly speaking, there is over 60% American support for the relationship. There's support for the U.S. force presence here. There is, interestingly, and of course, South Korea's image, public image more broadly, has been improving dramatically in the United States, and American familiarity with Korea also is improving dramatically. It used to be that in this particular relationship, it was almost like Koreans lived and breathed the United States here in South Korea, but Americans really didn't know anything about Korea. Now, everyday Americans, they may not always know it, but they're increasingly touching Korean products, Korean contributions, Korean food. Actually, Korean food has emerged among all of the K products. Korean food is probably the biggest major vector for positive influence and familiarity of Americans these days.
I heard that Korean seaweed, kim, has been so popular.
Different foods. I mean, I don't want to speak to specific foods necessarily.
I heard that that's a very good popular gift for Americans.
What I would say is that, in particular, the relationship, if you're going to talk about food, the relationship between CJ and Costco has made all the difference. And what I would say is that 20 years ago, it wouldn't be surprising if Koreans who come from Korea to the United States might say, well, okay, I'm only going to live in the United States if I can live close to H-Mart.
Oh, H-Mart.
But now they don't have to live close to H-Mart to get what they want. They just have to live near Costco. And Costco is everywhere in the United States. So that's a tremendous expansion just in terms of exposure to Korean products and availability of Korean products in the United States.
If I may ask one more question. Has it been recent trend that economic issues topped security issues in your public opinion survey data? I thought that security issues always prevail over economic issues. When has it happened?
Well, no, that's the reason why I highlighted it. Is just within the past couple of years.
Past couple of
years.
Okay.
That economic issues have become actually more important. It's actually the level, they're equally important, but this year they marginally topped security issues, but not by a margin.
Is it due to positive reasons like the increasing importance of economic benefits, or is it the result originated from the tariff bombs thrown by the Trump administration? Wow, we have to pay attention to economic interest between the countries.
I really don't have an empirical answer to that particular question, But one of the things that we've been doing is a series called Inside the Investment, where we actually go and see what the local impact is of Korean investment in the United States. And one fun fact in Indiana is that if you want to eat out in Bloomington, you better go to Kokomo.
Okay. All right.
Because there's more Korean restaurants in Kokomo than Bloomington.
All right. Good. It gives all of you more reason to pay attention to all the excellent reports and the survey data posted on the homepage of the KEI, easily accessible, right?
Okay, sure. And we're monitoring the economic developments very closely and looking at how this impacts the U.S.-Korea relationship.
Yeah, it has a wealth of information and analysis. I strongly recommend all of you pay attention to the reports and analysis by the KEI. Thank you so much for your long, eloquent speech covering a lot of grounds of difficult issues.
Thank you, Youngshik.
All right. Please join me in thanking Director Scott Snyder of the KEI for his speech.
네,
Thank
대화
you.
마칩니다. 네, 오늘 대담을 통해서 이렇게 깊은 인사이트 나눠주신 두 분께 여러분 다시 한번 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.